Good evening, everyone. It has been a few days since we have seen the 2024 Imola Grand Prix for this year, which saw Verstappen back to his winning ways after losing to Norris last time in Miami. Only just edging Norris, actually, with around 7/10 with a gap to Norris behind after Norris closed up from a gap of over 5 seconds. Maybe given a few more laps, he would have just got the better of him. It also saw Perez with a very disappointing weekend, having a crash in free practice, as well as doing very disappointingly in qualifying and the race as well, only finishing P8, despite his teammate obviously finishing P1. And it also saw some relatively good races from the likes of Haas and also Yuki Tsunoda finishing just inside the points in P10. We shall be talking about all of this and more here on this instalment of the Warwick F1 Show. I'm once again joined by Will Kingswood and Chinmay, and so, I think from what we've been talking about from before, it wasn't the best race of all time, I'd say. So if I ask for your predictions out, or so your rating out of 10, and tell me exactly why it is less than 5.
I mean, I was going to go 5, really. I think right at the end, obviously, there is that excitement of Norris closing up to Verstappen. You've kind of got that will he, kind of won't he, of whether he'll overtake or not. I think in the back of my mind, and maybe most people's, it was like Verstappen will be able to hold on. But it does show that last race in Miami wasn't just a one-off fluke, that McLaren can theoretically seemingly challenge Verstappen. It's a
promising signs.
Yeah, and challenge the top of the podium. But it wasn't an ideal race, and I think that just comes down to Imola. Now, there's not really an overtaking point on the track. They were saying it on the broadcast, but the first chicane, I think, definitely in F1 is just too quick for, I think it's 5th gear, they said they go through the Tamburello chicane, and that doesn't really make it an overtaking point. And I mean, you were seeing drivers who were quicker kind of get stuck behind drivers that were definitely not as fast. So I think it's just an issue with the track, and
possibly also the one DRS zone as well, so not very limited overtaking.
And one that they shortened for this year, I read, which is a bit of a curious decision. But no, I'd probably go 5 out of 10. I think it's one of those that Imola's never really going to be the best race on the calendar. But it's one of those you kind of get through. It's a great track to go back to. Like, you see kind of the drivers really enjoy it, really be on their limit there. So it is somewhere that maybe we do want to go back to, but it's not somewhere that generated great racing as we saw at the weekend.
Fair enough. Chinmay, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with most things that Will says. But yeah, I'll give it a 5 out of 10 and whatnot. Especially with how, Imola, it's a narrow track. There's only one overtaking spot realistically. And even though the fact that they cut the DRS for some reason this year, which I don't think was the right decision. This is one of the tracks where they should have cut the DRS, because especially with how difficult it is, there needs to be some sort of aid. There needs to be a genuine aid for overtaking over here. And obviously, especially when we're about to head to next weekend, it's good. Overtaking is going to be having a bit scarce with the overtaking side of things. But again, it did exceed expectations. Obviously, we saw the whole thing with Norris and Verstappen, and I think, to be fair, just knowing how difficult it is to overtake, and the fact that Norris had 5 lap holder tyres, he just killed the tyres out completely, so I don't think he would have actually got him at the end. But it was still very intriguing to watch. Finally seeing that the McLaren can actually compete with the Red Bull is actually a good sign, and hopefully they can keep the upwards trajectory going. Well, considering McLaren haven't blown their budget yet, but let's see how it goes.
No, I mean, certainly, and I certainly agree with you in the sense that the DRS should be longer. I think, especially in the early on in the race, where there was that kind of, say quote unquote battle is what they called it, between Piastri and Sainz, where it kind of felt how it was a few years ago when there was such a problem with dirty air, where it was the fact that you would just have the driver just fall back and back and back with the dirty air to to like very far behind, and the DRS would only really be used to kind of push them back up to where they were before they lost that time, and there wasn't really any overtaking to be done with DRS. It was only to kind of get rid of that gap, and it was exactly the same there. And yes, there were very limited, obviously, overtaking opportunities with such a tight and narrow circuit, especially with the current generation of cars. And I think also as well, for me personally, it was just with the kind of anticipation of being back at Imola, back at a proper racetrack, especially after Miami, which obviously is only like a street circuit as such, and also after Norris did challenge Verstappen quite successfully last time around, and so there was probably quite a lot of anticipation going into this race, and then just seeing all of that fall flat, unfortunately. So I think I'd agree. Even 4 out of 10, I'm tempted to say worst race of the season. To be honest, it wasn't. It was.
I'm trying to think. I wouldn't say worst race of the season, just because it kind of indicates like this. It indicates that there might be a challenge at the top.
I suppose so.
Rather than like you come into Bahrain and thinking, oh, will the year be different, and then Red Bull run away with a 1-2 kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think for me, that challenge and the potential for that challenge is the main thing to take out of it. That Verstappen, while he didn't run away at the start, he was putting that gap in, like obviously a few tenths kind of a lap. But I don't think the gap ever got more than about 7, 8 seconds, and then we see at the end Norris starts to reel him in quite quickly, and whether that's because Verstappen like cooked his tyres quite early because the tyre deg was quite high, whether that's for some other factor, we don't know. But it shows now that there is a genuine fight, at least between two teams, at least between, at the moment, Verstappen and Norris. And Ferrari aren't too far behind, it doesn't look like, at least with Charles Leclerc. So then the top three, it's almost like a top three in F1 is kind of being established again,
as it was like, back in 2018.
Well, like when we were growing up with like F1, we started off with kind of the Hamilton, Vettel, Alonso top three, and it almost looks like, and it maybe it is too early to say, but almost looks like there's another one being established now with Verstappen, Norris, and Leclerc, clear leaders of their teams at the moment. Verstappen, obviously night and day ahead of Perez. Norris with that experience probably over Piastri, who isn't a bad driver by any means, but just still needs that time to develop. And I think Leclerc on balance normally has the measure of Carlos Sainz. It's just on occasion Sainz can get ahead, and he's ended up with better results because it just happens to coincide with good fortune. But if McLaren can keep developing, and there is no reason to suggest that they can't, if Ferrari can keep developing, and again there's no reason to suggest that they can't, and Red Bull, not that they can't keep developing, but they look like they're being pegged back a little bit, especially now with the loss of Adrian Newey, who is being phased out of working on the car because obviously he's going to another team, or we think he's going to another team for 2025. By the end of the season, I wouldn't be surprised if we were getting like 3-way fights for the lead between 3 different teams. And I think even by the end of the season might be a conservative estimate. I think you could start to see, with one more set of upgrades for each team, and I imagine they've got some. And that's ultimately
what you want to see. Yeah. Really, is that I think most F1 fans would agree that we wouldn't really have any problem if Verstappen were to still win the championship, as long as that there is actually some competition compared to the ridiculous amount of dominance that we saw last year. But nevertheless, we'll move on to winners and spinners as we usually do. We mentioned Verstappen, obviously. He pretty much dominated the entire race until Norris was closing up on him in the latter stages. But I'd like to touch on McLaren and Ferrari as well, because both of them actually as well had a pretty respectable race, I would say. McLaren, obviously, there's been a lot of focus on Lando Norris finishing P2, but Piastri as well finishing P4, which I think is a brilliant result for him, especially how we talked about earlier on in the season, how he perhaps had hit a little bit of bad form compared to his amazing streak last season, and he really seems to be back in contention with the car and being that kind of second driver where he should be compared to Lando Norris, I would say personally.
Oh yeah, no, that goes without saying. I do think, Piastri's still got he's still got a little bit to climb. He's got to still actually, he's got to catch up to Norris as much as he can. But I think, this weekend was a promising one, and especially considering this is one of Lando Norris's strongest circuits on the calendar. He's historically, I think he's got his best podium hit rate, as I like to call it, with this track. So yeah, no, it definitely a strong showing. Unfortunately, like I said, like we mentioned earlier, Imola's just not an easy track to overtake. So, and the McLaren straight line speed is something to be desired. Compared to Lux, especially with Red Bull and Ferrari, and Williams. But that Williams is just a rocket in the straight line anyway. So obviously he was stuck behind Sainz for quite a long time of the race, but then. Yeah, he managed to hold on to fourth place pretty much on merit. I think Leclerc was just a little bit quicker and had a better strategy as well. So, yeah.
I think Leclerc quite passed under the radar quite a bit. There wasn't really much tension on him in the race, but still kind of just grinded out the race, nurtured the tyres, and got a very respectable P3, which I think is very impressive showing from him.
Well, I think for Leclerc and actually for Piastri as well, for me, it's just they did the best that they should have done. I think Piastri didn't have the pace to I don't think challenge Leclerc, but he beat Sainz, and he clearly had the pace to beat Sainz. So he did what he was meant to have done. Leclerc didn't he was challenging Norris at one point for a few laps, but then seemed to drop back. I do think the tyres were a big factor in that. But once he drops back, he's not going to catch the top two. He's not going to, and then the goal is not to fall to fourth. So Leclerc kind of did what he could and got the point, and both of them got the constructors' points for the team that they need to challenge each other, because obviously I think Ferrari and McLaren is going to be one of the biggest constructors' fights this season, but also potentially challenge Red Bull, at least in the Constructors' Championship, because while Verstappen is obviously performing and is getting these wins, or at the very, very least second places, his teammate Perez had, I think it's fair to say, a poor performance over the weekend. Obviously, you mentioned that crash in FP3, going out in Q2 in quali, and then never really looking like he was even going to challenge the Mercedes. I think he was 10, 15 seconds behind Hamilton.
He got very easily bogged down from the cars behind, and then just never really got going at all. Really, to be honest, it was.
No.
And I think that shows now that, going back to the previous, that Red Bull maybe aren't, Red Bull's car isn't now as night and day quick as it was in the end of 2022, most of 2023. At this point, it is more becoming Verstappen, and this is not me saying that Verstappen wasn't putting in those performances last season, but it's now becoming Red Bull are winning because of Verstappen, not Red Bull are winning and Verstappen is making it more dominant. You're seeing that with Perez, who is struggling.
So do you think it's because of the upgrades that Ferrari and McLaren have made?
Yeah, I think
that is the reason that perhaps Verstappen's getting a bit more worried and he's having to put in those kind of amazing performances to keep Red Bull on top, essentially.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And you saw it throughout practice and throughout the first two stages of quali that it didn't look like Red Bull or Verstappen was going to be on pole. And I think I don't want to take his final lap away from him, because it was an incredible lap, obviously put him on pole, but had he not had that tow from Nico Hülkenberg on one of his final runs, it would have been a lot closer in terms of who puts it on pole. And then if Verstappen's not on pole, then does the race kind of plan out differently? Because we've not really seen a Verstappen stuck behind someone. We don't really know how the Red Bull operates in dirty air as well. And I guess if you're looking at Perez's indications, it may be the case that the Red Bull's not great in dirty air. So if Verstappen doesn't put in those performances, then Red Bull might be suffering more, and then that's when Ferrari and McLaren, through two consistent drivers that they both have, can potentially start to challenge in the constructors.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because obviously there's also development more to go on as well, because obviously, yes, Red Bull are being hindered by the lack of wind tunnel time and the fewer resource allocation they've got. But then obviously, like with the emergence of Ferrari, I wouldn't say McLaren because they're currently 134 points behind. I'm just looking at the standings.
Yeah, but I mean, we've got what?
We've still got a lot.
But only roughly 50 points behind with Ferrari. I think it's 56 points. I'm looking at the constructors.
They're 56 points behind, 212, and then McLaren are 114 points behind.
I'd say it's still very much in Red Bull's hands, but it's definitely not as dominant as we were seeing from last season. Which we expected because last season was unlike anything we'd ever seen. But it's good to be seeing that we're going in the right direction. But do you think on the touch of the car in dirty air, do you think that Red Bull? Well, you think that Red Bull surely must set up their car to work at the front, a bit like what Mercedes and Hamilton have done, and so maybe that is why Perez did struggle as much as he did in the queue of cars behind in 10th. We'll actually move on to Perez now, as we have been talking about him for a little bit. Definitely much just a spinner for this weekend. As we mentioned, crashing in the free practice session. You said that FP3 wasn't it? And then qualifying P11, and then just got bogged down from a lot of cars in front of him throughout the entire race, and it just. It never got going, and so it's.
He should be beating the Mercedes though.
Oh, yeah.
I stand by
100%. Yeah.
This is even ignoring quali, it's still a bad performance, and then you add quali into that, and it's an even worse performance.
Yeah, because at least even on a track like Imola, where there is still possibility to overtake, you're still expected to make your way up the grid. But I'm seeing this year. I'm seeing a lot of parallels at points with Bottas in 2020.
But 2020 Bottas.
2020 Bottas, I'm talking.
Okay, I can allow
2020 Bottas.
I thought you were about to say Bottas as a whole.
No, not Bottas as a whole. Bottas
disrespectful to Bottas.
Yeah,
Bottas is a severely underrated driver in my opinion. Especially now, considering how with that stuff. But what was I going to say now?
You were comparing him Bottas 2020.
Yes.
So what, like quality performances?
No, probably more on the race performances. Because the thing is, the Mercedes in that year was obviously potentially the most dominant car we've ever seen. One of the most dominant.
Yeah.
Well, at least one of the fastest.
Definitely one of the most.
Well, at least especially the nicest to watch in qualifying. Just Lewis Hamilton's Spa in the second sector was something else.
Then the upshifts in P1. I miss those days. I really miss those days.
But because that car, the main weakness of that car was that it was completely awful behind in dirty air.
I think that was a weakness Mercedes tended to have throughout the kind of dominance era of 2014. It's just they were always near the front, so it never became an issue.
So is that their car, or is that a tactical setup because they know that they are most likely to be at the front, and so they set up their car to be at the front?
It's got to be I would say it's like 70-30 car to set up. I'm not an expert. I've said this many times, but I don't think setup you can change. Like you can rearrange the table basically.
Yeah.
But what's on the table is what's there.
Yeah.
That is a very weird analogy, but it kind of works.
Yeah, yes.
I think Red Bull, they have a good car. There's no denying that. It is still probably the best car on the grid, just about, I'd say, but it's a lot closer with McLaren. And I'd say just about.
Yeah, it's around about the same. It's interesting, but then we talk about Perez finishing at 8th, and obviously last time round, if you haven't seen our 2025 driver predictions, then you should after this episode. But we talked about saying that Perez, or at least I thought that he'd done enough if he continued to put in those performances. And so I don't know. Maybe he listened to our podcast and thought he's got to do something about that. But do you just put this down as just a fluke performance and just an off day? Because he has been putting in quite decent, consistent performances for any race before this. And he has been like picking up those points behind Verstappen where he can. Certainly, I think if before we had this race, we'd say probably better than he did last season. So do you just count this as a fluke for now? And then if these performances continue to move on, then you might think that Red Bull look elsewhere? Or is this really a cause for concern?
No, I think it's fair enough to, for the time being, say this might be a blip.
Yes.
But we've seen it last year. Perez put in really good performances for the first few races of the season and then dropped off as soon as we got to Europe.
But he's street circuit merchant, so Monaco would be.
Well, provided he doesn't crash just before the tunnel again.
That's a good point. Yes, if you can just take it a bit slow around that corner and then pole position, Perez hit it first.
I'm looking at his finishing positions now. Bahrain and Saudi P2. Yeah, that's fine. Australia, he doesn't pick up those points. He finishes P5.
And that's, again, the race where Verstappen did DNF. So that's where, as a second driver, you'd expect him, you need him to be in.
Japan, P2, I'll grant. China, P3. Yeah, that's fine. But then these last two races, you've got Miami, P4. Like, it's not ideal. And then, like, obviously, P8 in Imola. You're kind of seeing a trend that as the cars are your McLarens and your Ferraris are getting better, Perez is falling back, and I think it's very much that he was being disguised by the dominance. I think it's like he's got more at his time in Red Bull. He's got more Q2 or Q1 exits than he's got front row starts. And that I feel like I think I read that somewhere, and I think for the time being, I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt. But if we're coming into Canada, into Spain, into maybe Austria, and these have continued, then there is still real cause for concern. And when you've got promising young rookies that are still performing, if you've listened last week, you'll know my love for Yuki Tsunoda. I still think he should be in that seat. But either way, even if you do have Yuki, if you've got Liam Lawson, and if you've got even a Carlos Sainz who's still on the drivers' market, then you could his seat isn't completely safe.
No, and then especially if his performances keep going like this, he's 100% in danger of losing it.
Well, and those 100 points that Red Bull have over McLaren and the 50 they have over Ferrari kind of evaporate very quickly because a second and a third.
Well, he's also lost second in the driver standings as well.
So Leclerc now up to P2.
And certainly. Lando's only 6 points behind.
Oh, I did not know that.
So I'll give the slight overview for those who don't want to keep searching up everything. So effectively, Max is obviously in the lead, 161 points, quite comfortably. Second place is Leclerc. He's 48 points behind on 113. And then 6 points behind is Sergio Perez, who has just lost second place after Emilia Romagna. And then 6 points behind that is Lando Norris at 101. And not far behind is Carlos Sainz. So, the top, especially the fight for second right now, is quite open. There's only 6 to 8 points between each driver. We're only about a third of the way through the season.
Yeah.
Has Perez always got second place in previous seasons? I know he did last season. He has. Okay.
Just about in both. No, was he comfortably second in 2022? But it was looking a bit ropey in 23 with Lewis Hamilton.
No, not in 2022.
I thought, was he third?
He was third by 3 points.
From Leclerc. So
Leclerc 308, Perez 305, Russell 275.
So maybe he has been carried a little bit then by
he's absolutely been carried by the car.
Far 2023 is the only time he's actually finished second place in the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, but even that was looking a bit ropey until the final few races.
Yeah.
Like Lewis was kind of.
And that was in
challenging
a
it.
car which is arguably one of the most dominant that we've ever seen, or a
statistic-
little bit
Well,
by.
statistically, is the most dominant we've ever seen.
Well,
at
okay,
least
yeah,
for one
with
driver.
Verstappen, but yeah, with
Yeah,
the
but I know,
car,
I know what you
definitely,
mean.
yeah.
There's still a 50-point thing.
Mm.
So, but yeah, like we said, that
Yeah.
can. But yeah, anyway, we'll move on to some more honourable mentions other than Perez. Just quickly talk about them before we go into our reviewing our predictions. So, Stroll and Tsunoda with very respectable. Stroll got some decent points with obviously Alonso not doing very well for the entire weekend. So Stroll finished P9 and Tsunoda P10.
Once again, proving my love of Yuki completely correct.
I agree that he's a good driver.
That Red Bull seat. I'm standing by that.
Fair enough.
The Mercedes are also there as the best.
Yeah,
they
they were just that is their position. They did their job.
They are
yes.
so solidly the fourth best team.
No, they are unfortunately at this point.
Prime 6th or 7th when someone because inevitably someone once a week, one of the top 6 has an issue. That means the Mercedes can come 6th and 7th.
Pretty much, yeah. And it was Perez's turn to take that this time. I thought Nico Hülkenberg actually did really well as well for the whole weekend.
Yeah.
And was actually very unlucky to not finish in the points in the end. I think he really deserved at least a point to finish.
I think that it's just a victim of the fact that there are at the moment 4 and realistically 5 teams that
very
are
good
like,
teams indeed.
better.
Yeah.
So when you kind of don't get those issues, the points positions are limited in what they can give out.
Yeah, as long as they're not Alfa Romeo, not Alfa Romeo, Sauber.
Kick Sauber.
Yes, Kick Sauber, Williams or Daniel Ricciardo. You're pretty much fighting for points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Alpine, but
it's there's 3 stages. You've got the top 4 teams, and realistically, you've got the top 5 teams that will take the first 10. Then you've got the real challengers, which are Tsunoda, probably the 2 Haas's, and maybe someone else who decides.
Maybe
to have
Albon if he was up there.
Yeah, who decides to have a good weekend, and then you're kind of left with the final 6 that really aren't.
Yeah, I was going to come on to those. The bottom 7, apart from Alonso, is pretty much what you'd expect. Obviously Albon DNF. I think his car had a lot of issues with the. I think it was the front right wheel, and I think they did retire him at lap 50. I think it was just because they didn't see any real pace in the car and just thought it wasn't really much point to continue.
I think it was that, and I think as well that it was because they would have had to run the mediums for about 40 odd laps because their only set of hards that they had left was the set that was damaged in the pit stop that went wrong. So you're running a decade-old tyres.
Yeah, it's
to finish 20.
It's not ideal.
It's not really much point. I mean, Alonso also had a quite frankly shocking weekend.
It wasn't his finest hour. No, it
crashed
was
in FP3 out in Q1. Never made progress at all through the field. Again, I think that's one you just chalk up to.
Yeah, weekend you'd want to forget. It's and like I said, the rest is quite predictable. Alpine again, nowhere. Ricciardo, nowhere.
I don't think Ricciardo was that bad.
Yeah,
Tsunoda, he was just there is a gap, and the Haas has managed to fill it.
And then obviously Kick Sauber not really getting anywhere either. So
Logan Sargent P17.
Brilliant performance. Sergeant masterclass.
That Williams this year is not a good car.
It's not as certainly not as because obviously in previous years it actually looks like they were making quite a bit of progress and maybe dropped off a little bit.
Like last year, the Williams was, I think, lower decent.
It was in that region of just scrapping for the final few points, wasn't it? And they were and they did manage to get that on a few occasions. Yeah.
But, I mean, and then I don't think. This is why I don't think Logan Sargent is underperforming this year, because I do genuinely think that is where the car.
I mean, Williams. I'm just looking now. Williams still have not scored a single point.
No.
So they are technically behind Alpine, which is technically classified as trash. So it is.
I love you said technically behind Alpine. Like Alpine have scored a point.
Yeah, they've scored. Okay, right. They've been quite lucky, perhaps, but yes. But anyway, I think.
It's like they managed to beat fact that his main season Albon not getting a point has actually not come true.
Like
Oh, it was only on the Warwick.
Norris technically won the Miami Grand Prix.
It's only on the Instagram page for like 2 weeks, and then it wasn't true. By the way, I sent that in before. Was it before the start of the season? Something like that.
It must have been. It must have been after testing.
Pretty much.
It
was.
was after testing.
Yeah.
I know. No, you mentioned this way before the season starts.
But it's the first thing. But anyway, we'll move on to having a look at our predictions, which I'm quite looking forward to because I actually had quite a good week.
I'm
Will, if you're listening, he's probably not. He actually can't because his ear's blocked. But you're welcome. So we shall move on to.
Take it in order.
So my top 5. Well, I got the top 2 perfectly correct. Obviously, it was my week to choose Verstappen. Sorry, I didn't know. So it was very. Will was not looking very. Sorry, that was
Verstappen. Must be nice.
Sorry. But yeah, so I got Verstappen and Norris correct. Sainz finished P5. I unfortunately put in P3, so that's 1 point. Alonso, we won't talk about that. And Perez, we also won't talk about that. So that's 7 points from my top 5. And do you want me to do 1, 2, and 3 as well?
Might as well.
So I said for my 1 point prediction, both Alpines finishing outside the points, and quite predictably they did. So that's another point. Double Haas points finished, neither of them got in the points, so that's unfortunately not that. And then a Red Bull double stack will be faster than a Sauber pit stop. I don't even think that there was a Red Bull double stack, but like we said before, it's quite difficult to double stack with the gap between them. So that is 8 points for me this weekend.
Yeah. Okay, I'll move on to me now. So I've had a fairly decent. Hang on. I've had a fairly decent week as well. So I'll go through my top 5. I put Leclerc first. He finished 3rd. Then I got Norris correct.
Cool.
In 2nd place, I put Sainz in 3rd, who unfortunately was the wrong Ferrari. Piastri I got right in 4th.
Okay. Fair enough.
And then obviously the tactical Verstappen 5th. Obviously he won. Inevitably, so
should have kept faith in Piastri. I'm realizing now, rather than going with Alonso.
Yeah. So from that alone, I've got 9 points. Especially considering my 3.1 to 3 didn't go to plan exactly. I mean, my 1 point didn't go to plan thanks to Sergio Perez. It was a red flag in the weekend, so not on Friday, either on Saturday or Sunday. There was a red flag, and there was an FE3.
Yeah, no, that counts.
So, which counts. I said Mercedes knocked out in Q1 plus a depressed Toto.
No, he was just Toto was just like very mediocre this weekend.
He's the acceptance phase.
Yeah.
Yes. That didn't happen. Obviously, both ended up in Q3. And then I said all Ferrari engine teams score at least a point each. Score points.
That's so optimistic.
So, that is mostly optimistic on Hülkenberg scoring. He was 11th, and obviously Sauber.
There's not enough room for both Saubers.
No.
It's got to be a lot of damage in turn 1.
The day Sauber score points is the day something has gone horrifically wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I only got 1 point from that, so I got a nice 10 pointer from that.
Very nice indeed.
I'm just really bad. I went Norris P1. It's kind of close. Only 7/10.
Well, if you can't go Verstappen P1, then it's.
But unfortunately, it means I can't go Norris P2.
Yes.
I went Verstappen P2, so that's 2 points, and then Sainz P3, Leclerc P4, and Perez P5. So that's 2 points each or 1 point each for Sainz and Leclerc. So 4 points off the top 5, and then I've said a Merc finishes in P6, P7, or P8. They finish P6
and P7.
So 1 point. 3 or more drivers outside the top 5 teams in the points. It was only Yuki Tsunoda, so no points there. And then I've said the leader spins out of the race in DNFs, which, if Verstappen had been put under more pressure, might have been possible. But unfortunately, he's quite good, so no. So yeah, that's 5 points for me, and I continue to be terrible at this prediction thing we did.
It's well, still plenty of opportunity later on in the season to catch up or for the results to change. Do we have anything else to note from the grid order at all?
If you love watching cars follow one another for like an hour and a half on end, you'll love next week.
Because it is the Monaco Grand Prix. Make sure to tune into qualifying because that is the only actual part of the weekend
I'm watching
of
the
relevance.
FA Cup final. United are playing.
Oh, of course, yeah. Oh, yeah. I do hope they lose. It's
that's really rude.
as a Liverpool fan,
Yeah,
I do.
you're
You're against two Liverpool fans here. We have to.
Your manager left you.
It's often
You've got your own bold guy now. We're probably sacking ours. To be fair.
So we are. I think we are at the Clarendon, aren't we? And we are. I think going to be organising a Saturday qualifying viewing because it is that important, realistically. So we can. So yeah, make sure to get to those on campus and at the Clarendon for both of those this weekend. But apart from that. I've been your host, Callum. Thank you very much, Will and Chinmay, for joining me. And until next time, goodbye.